This is Tom Morgan for The Leading Edge, and it is with great excitement that I introduce Tim Freak. Tim is the author of 35 books, but has spent the last 10 years working on a new worldview that he's going to introduce to us today. The quick origin story of why this interview is happening is that our mutual friend Alexander Biner suggested I come and join a call with Tim, and I only had 30 minutes, but I thought I'd pop in and just see what it was all about. And then within 5 minutes of listening to Tim speak, I cleared my calendar for the rest of the day, and then have spent upwards of, I would say, 20 hours in the intervening weeks listening obsessively to Tim's new pod book, he calls it, which is a multi-part series available on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify, I believe, outlining this new worldview. So, Tim, let's get straight into it. Tell me about this new worldview and what you've been up to for the last 10 years.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. So, uh, the foundational idea, Tom, I would say, is an answer to the question I've asked all my life, which is, what is this that we're experiencing? Here it is again. It's always here. What is it? And I've become very taken with a very simple idea, which can then expand to be quite comprehensive, which is that this is a process of becoming, in which each new moment arises from the previous moment, but is always fresh and creative. The past repeats in a new way. So that's what I've always experienced. Never been a time when I haven't experienced that. So the hypothesis that I'm following is, oh, well, what if that's what reality is? What if it is the realization of ever more emergent possibilities, where emergent means the next thing emerges from the thing before? And that's got us from primitive beginnings of the universe to us discussing the nature of the universe. And what really intrigues me is that I think it can become a way that we can put into one single narrative both physics and biology and the cosmology that science has given us, and a different way of understanding the importance and significance of spiritual experiences. So that the hypothesis is, what if everything that has any form whatsoever, whether it's the earth, your dream last night, the number 7, anything at all, everything is part of this one process of forming. That's the underlying idea. And then if there's a significance and reality to what we're experiencing in spiritual states, that has evolved also.
And that's something I want to come back to in a moment. You made this very elegant analogy between contemporary technology and how reality actually works, relating to AI. And I thought that was really helpful in terms of grounding what you're saying.
Yes. So what I'm suggesting is that what we've learned is that, well, one of the things that physics is on the leading edge of physics is that the category we need to understand the ontological basement, as the physicist Paul Davies calls it beautifully. If we want to understand the basement of reality, we need to think of it in terms of information, not things, but information. And I think we can discuss later what that means, because I think that's important too. But information is obviously what we use in AI. So I think we can understand this process of evolution, of evolutionary emergence, like a learning AI system. Now, it isn't a learning AI system. I don't for 1 minute think the universe is a computer. I think people who suggest that are way off myself. But I think it's the other way around. I think we found computing and AI because it's mimicking, in some limited way, the way the universe actually is. And the way the universe actually is that information is accumulating and forming what could be described as algorithms, which govern how everything's functioning. So here's another big idea for me in terms of this fundamental nature of things, which is that the past hasn't passed. It's accumulated. There's more of it, and that's more information. So just like we now understand the universe since the Big Bang and Einstein, the universe isn't something which is in space. The universe is expanding space. That's what it is. And in the same way, I think we can go, look, the universe isn't in time. Einstein again made that clear. It's actually expanding time. And all of the things which have formed are now informing what is forming. So the past is informing this. So I have this particular accent because of my history. I move in this sort of way because of my biological genetics. I can think these thoughts because I've got these ideas and not some different idea. And that goes right back into the nature of everything. Every single thing is doing that. So we can see this, that we get away from the idea of intelligent design. There must be some intelligence making it happen. And we go, no, this is the evolution of intelligence. That's what's happening.
Well, that idea that basically there's this kind of universal hard drive and we're remixing subtly at the edge every single time. There's one of the many, many things I love about your worldview is it situates the individual in relationship with reality, like right at the middle. And one of the things that immediately endeared me to you was that you basically said you now disagree with what was in your previous 35 books. And I'd be really interested for you to dig into that a little bit.
Yes, yeah. Well, to be fair, 34, because the last one, the one that's behind me, was the start of all of this. So that one I still hold with. But there's some key ideas, and really because what I was doing, I mean, if I just give you a little outline of the genesis of my work, I'd say the first period of my writing, I was very influenced by the perennial philosophy, the idea that there is a commonality to spiritual experience, which in one way there is, because it's all human experience, and got pulled into that, especially through a particularly Indian philosophy, through that view, and went through all these traditions, writing books on all of them, going, look, it's kind of here. Look what we find here. Another human being's experiencing this. What's that? And that led me then to a point where I felt like, look, I need to do my best to articulate this perennial philosophy, but for the 21st century. I need to do what my heroes, I need to try anyway, try and do what my heroes have done, which is they've taken it forward, they've evolved it and gone. And so I really focused very hard on that. And that led to a few books, which I think are really good books, just they're wrong. And what I think I did, Tom, was for me, I articulated it so clearly that I saw what was wrong with it. And that led me to go, right, I've got to go back to square one and go, okay, so how can I re-understand this? And the big thing I rejected was idealism, the idea that this is all in consciousness, and came to a view that no, putting something like consciousness as the ground is far too much. What I think spirituality does all the time is it takes things which are appropriate to the human level and it puts them on the foundational level where they don't belong. So it's anachronistic. It's taking things from one time and putting it in a different time. And that's what I think myths are. Now, I love myths, but we do need to go beyond them. And so what spirituality tends to do is they go, well, there's, the universe is coming from something which is conscious or something which is intelligent or something which is loving. And I don't think any of those things are going to arrive until much later with biology. What we're going to see at the early levels is what we can describe with maths. And but that can sound really cold. People go, oh, it was a bit cold, isn't it? But the thing is, it's not cold. And the reason it's not cold is because emotional warmth or coldness isn't going to arrive for billions of years. So it's again anachronistic to look at it and go, ooh, it's a bit, we feel that now, but now warmth has arisen. Now I would say the universe has become divine. Now the universe is full of purpose, but it doesn't start with that. I think, it starts with something much simpler. It starts with the one becomes two. And getting that flips everything.
So yeah, the way I understand this is basically like rather than consciousness being primary, the process of unfolding is primary, and that
Yes.
eventually leads to consciousness down the line. But you don't say the thing that's evolved was the first thing that was, because the consciousness thing is the thing that we have. Is that the way I'm understanding it, right?
Yes, yes. And the whole point, yeah, exactly right. And we are naturally drawn to the more emergent because it's more emergent.
Yeah.
That's why we love it. You know, the idea that consciousness being so valuable, why? Because it's very emergent. For most of the universe, there were no systems having this conscious experience. We want this conscious experience. It's fantastic. We're drawn to love or spiritual states of oneness, all because these are very emergent.
Hmm.
It's taken a lot of process to get there, and that's their importance. We need to stop retrospecting them. Just to be fair, maybe because it helps people sometimes. I think science does the opposite, but the same problem, the opposite direction. Often, what people in the scientific community do with reductionism is they take categories which are appropriate to the very low levels, like information, for instance, matter, and go, it's all really that. So all your experiences of the divine or love or all of that's really just the working out of these mechanical laws, these laws of nature. And that's doing the same thing. It's using a language which is appropriate, or concepts which are appropriate to the foundational level, and applying them to the human level, where we need completely different categories now to understand that.
So help me understand this then. So one of the things I've been rather fond of is this idea that appears to be going very, very rapidly mainstream, that you would say consciousness is not confined to the body, where basically, to use again, to go back to contemporary technology, no one thinks the internet is in their phone. Right. No one thinks Taylor Swift is in the radio. The internet is both in your phone that has local storage, and it is in the cloud as well. But you've said on previous interviews that we have these two views: one that like our brains create consciousness, and the other that our brains receive consciousness. But there's a third option that people don't talk about. How does that fit in?
Okay, so consciousness, it's such a, I mean, the word, I mean, with knowledge, what does it mean? It means literally opposite things to different people.
Yeah.
So for some people, consciousness is everything you're conscious of. It's the object of what you're experiencing. For other people, it's this ephemeral presence that's the experiencer, pure consciousness, which is the opposite. And then for some other people, it's the psyche, this other experience we're having right now, which is not of the senses. So let's just leave that word consciousness for a bit, put it on one side. I think it's so unhelpful. Here's what I see. I see that I am conscious of some things that I focus on. And it can be what I'm looking at, what I'm hearing, or it could be what I'm imagining, or a dream, or anything. Whatever I focus my attention on, I process it in high definition. So I think consciousness is a thing we do. We're conscious of things because it's a type of processing. So every system exists in relationship with the whole informational ecology on its own level. And that as those systems have evolved, they've become able to read their environment better and better and better. You get the senses. And then with biology, some of that vast amount of information that you're now taking in, as we are right now, some of it really matters and the vast majority of it doesn't. So that the system has learnt to focus on what really matters. And that is what we experience in high definition, and we call that conscious experience. So the example I like to use is, I'm conscious of you because you matter to me. Right now, you're there, I'm talking to you, but I haven't been conscious of my left foot. I've been taking in information about it, so if someone dropped something on it, I would be conscious of it, but unconsciously. Now I've mentioned it, I'm now conscious of it, because my attention's gone to it. So that's what I see consciousness as, that every system is reading its environment, and now we can do it consciously. Okay, so that puts consciousness on one side. Then your question, which isn't really to do with that, your question, I think, is to do with psyche.
Yeah.
So I'm experiencing, consciously and unconsciously, two absolutely different types of experience, as everyone is, all the time. I'm experiencing the sensory world with my biological senses, and I'm experiencing an imaginal domain, which is made of images of sensory experiences, in which I can remember things I experienced in the past. I can imagine things I haven't experienced. I can have dreams where I create whole landscapes. I can go off into shamanic journeys. I can have LSD visions. I can experience God. I can experience people who've died. All sorts of things you can do in this domain. And that's what in the past has been called the spirit realm, or now. What I think is I don't think it's, or the word psyche means soul. People may or may not know that. It's just the Greek version of the German word soul. It means the same thing. So to me, it is first of all not controversial to go, you are a body and a soul. It's absolutely bleeding obvious. Have a look. You're experiencing something which is physical and something which is not physical or spiritual. That's the old teaching. So all of the traditions are to do with that, because that's what every human being is experiencing. And one of them, I'm a body here. I'm not where you are. I'm here. Where am I in the imagination or the imaginal or the soul? I'm not anywhere. And again, I don't think it's non-controversial. It's just obvious. That is not in physical space. It's an imaginal space. And how we're connected in imaginal space is not how we're connected in physical space. So I'm not close to you in physical space, but right now I'm very close to you in my soul because I'm connecting with you. Yeah. And I'm also always very close to my daughter, who's in a city quite distant to me, but there she is, I can feel it. So this is, again, it feels like, look, the soul, we exist as a soul, that's not controversial. It's definitely not in space, that's not controversial. So how can we understand it? Where did it come from? What's its nature? And in understanding that, we can come to understand, I think, all spiritual experiences.
Yeah, and I want to go to the role of death in a little while, but there was a moment when I was listening to one of your interviews, and for context, I believe you had a mystical experience at 12 that I'm a slow learner, so I had to wait till 36 before I had mine. But they sounded very, very similar in character, and after I had this mystical experience, I got an absolute shed load of terrible advice, and from almost everyone. And one of them was like, "Oh, great! Now you just need to meditate your ego away and merge with the divine." And there were moments where I was listening to you talk about and you described not some versions of non-duality as superficial, where I was like, "Oh, there's something that you're talking about that literally made me fist pump when I was listening to it." I was like, "Oh, he's got it! He's articulated something that I always felt wasn't quite right in terms of the primacy of the individual." Could you talk a bit more about that? And then also, let's go into the definition of unividualism.
Okay. Great questions. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I had exactly the same thing. I was young when that happened, and that set me off on this whole journey. And what I encountered was the same. And I survived it, thank goodness, because some people don't. It's quite hard. I think it's upside down. And the reason it's upside down is the underlying ontology, where ontology, just for those that sound like a weird word, is what the nature of reality is. That's all it means. So a lot of probably just about all of the spiritual traditions, certainly the perennial philosophy idea, this is fallen. God exists, or something exists which is sublime, and we've fallen. So the soul has fallen into the body. The body is a tomb, Plato says. This is a hard world because it's fallen, and we need to escape and get back to what's real. It's a very, very negative view, which is why it goes, look, you've got an ego, which is basically your individuality, actually. And we're not talking about egotism here, which I think everyone would agree is not a good thing, where it's like, hey, I'm just all about me. I don't give a damn about you. I think everyone would agree that's not a good path to go down. But this is something more. This is going, your attachments to your family are in the way. Your dreams or aspirations are in the way. Everything that makes you human, your emotions, it's all in the way. You've got to get rid of that, and then you can go back to this blissful state that you touched in your mystical experience. I want to turn that ontology on its head and go, we haven't fallen. We're actually emerging, we're evolving towards that. And that the individual is not the obstacle, it's the foundation from which we do that. And this 14 billion years that has led to you and me as individuals thinking, which is another thing which is in the way, thinking, being able to consider and reflect and discuss, this is not in the way. This is a massive evolutionary achievement. And we should evolve our individuality such that we're able to then make another jump and go, oh, hang on, I'm an individual, but there's a fundamental oneness. Everything, it's a universe. There's a oneness of being. So my essential being is the same as yours and everything. And it's that recognition, I think, that happens, whether we describe it like that, doesn't matter, but that's a big element in many mystical experiences. And it's often people, this was true for me when I was young, I didn't experience that oneness exactly. I experienced love, but love arises from the oneness.
Yeah.
You don't know that.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening. You feel connected with everything and the emotional response. So you don't know how you've done it, but you feel the response, and the response is this incredible love but what's happening, I think, is you're sensing the oneness. So to come to your second question, I'm wanting to suggest that the next jump in our evolution, and we can get into this, but make no mistake about it, human beings have evolved. We are not the same. We're a development from, but we're not the same as our ancestors. They moved it forward, and then we have to move it forward, but it's different. We're different because of them. And I think the next stage in our human evolution will be from individuals to unividuals. And the modern individual is only a few hundred years old, really. We've individuated out of a collective identity where we're just our cultural conditioning. That's what's given us the world, that's what's given us the internet and so much new stuff, because we're thinking in new ways. And then the next jump, I think, is from individuals to unividuals, whereby a unividual is an individual who has emerged to the place where they can be conscious that they're also one with the universe and have this enormous love and this great benevolence. And that will, I think, that will usher in a new phase of human evolution.
There's something incredibly compelling about that because, without getting into the wonky science, complexity science says that the universe is continuously optimizing for greater complexity, and complexity is differentiation and integration. So we're constantly optimizing for Tim to be the most Tim he can be, for Tom to be the most Tom he can be, while also being integrated into the whole. And you talked about the individual being paralogical, which is just your word for being able to hold paradox. And there's this incredibly elegant idea that the individual can actually understand the definition of a individual because the definition of a individual is a paradox. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you can get how seemingly opposite things actually sit together. Now, not all opposite things sit together. Some of them just contradict, but some of them fit together. And that's this ability to hold paradox. And the individuals like that. So what you get with those traditions that you were mentioning, Tom, which have such a down on your humanity, is they can't get that. So they think, look, if it's all one, then your individuality must be an illusion. Whereas I don't think that's true at all. I think it is all one, and the individual has arisen from that. Is that oneness arising as an individual? It's like, the old metaphor of the waves on the sea. It is all one ocean, yeah, but they are individual waves. So it's not just the water, is it? It's also the information which is making the waves, and we are that individuality. So, once you get that, then that old view. Let me just say one more thing about this, because this really gets it for me, Tom. This is a long time ago for me now, when I was making these transitions. I had my daughter, she's grown up now. And when she was little, I started thinking to myself, with all these spiritual ideas that I'd had put into me, and all read and all that, would I tell them to my daughter? And then I started thinking, no.
Oh.
No, would I tell her, you're not really an individual?
Yeah.
No. Would I say, do you just need to stop thinking, darling? I'm a bit worried you're going to school and people keep making you think. You need to stop thinking. No. Would I say to her, just be in the moment? No. I'd say, think about tomorrow. And honor. Would I say have no attachments? Oh, daddy, I love you. Well, don't have any attachments. No. So if I wouldn't say them to her, why would I say them to myself?
That's so powerful. Well, I really like the observation that you had that like the Taoists 3,000 years ago were like, guys, the Taoists 2,000 years ago from us were they were the only people that really understood what was going on.
Yeah, yeah,
And we have
yeah,
these constant appeals backwards.
yeah,
Like that's completely at odds with your viewpoint, where whatever's emerging now is at the leading edge.
yeah.
And so, all right, let's make this tangible for people listening. How do individuals act? How do people bring this into their lives, or how do they experience it? You've been running retreats for what,
Yeah,
decades, right?
yeah.
There are practicalities behind this.
Absolutely. I've just finished one, Tom, and you know, honest, I wish I could say what it feels like without it sounding corny.
Uh,
Because it's just the most enormous connection, most enormous love, and it's it ju- it's like trying to describe falling in love to someone who hasn't yet. It's like whoa. So how do you do that? Well, it's all about where you put your attention, ultimately, really, because that's the thing where you process in high definition. So guided meditations are about, hey, what happens if you put your attention there? What happens if you put your attention there? So, for instance, we're talking about the oneness. What happens if instead of focusing that attention on anything in particular, you focus it on the everything? What's it got in common? That it all exists. You focus on the field of being within which everything is happening. Well, whatever you focus on, if you can hold it, starts to become vivid. And then you see, oh, the thinking, where it's constantly, oh, you my God, stop thinking. That's not a problem at all. Thinking is a really good thing. But if you put your attention on your thoughts instead, you've just moved your attention. So now they will become vivid. So you don't want to do that. Not at that moment. You do that later. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but not then. So that's meditation. And then the thing I've really been working on for quite a long time now, 20 years or more, 25 years, is what happens when we put that attention on each other. And this is what blows me away. Because we said earlier, look, you're a psyche or a soul. So am I. And I can look at you, and I'm looking at pixels on a screen, which is amazing, isn't it? But it's representing your face for me. But what I'm connecting with is your psyche. I can't see it. I can't hear it. I hear what it says. But I damn well can, what I call psi sense it. I can focus in with my psyche and go, yeah, that's Tom, got it. And the same thing, if I then focus my attention, it becomes more and more vivid. And suddenly, from being two isolated psyches, the people that are doing it become into what I call communion. It's not union because you're still individual, but it's a communion. And that is where these deep spiritual, deep awake states open up.
and I will point people listening to a guided meditation you have at episode 10 of your pod book as well. Now, you've had a few ideas that have you won't see it, but on the interview with Ali Biner that you did, there was a moment when my jaw literally dropped because of the novelty of the idea that you brought in, and it was around the evolution of the death experience, and it absolutely blew me away. You also said that death was the linchpin in the change of your worldview, and you didn't go into that then, and I was just wondering if you could go into that now because I wanted to know what you meant.
Okay, so this whole transition really kicked off after I'd seen both my parents through their deaths.
Hmm.
And that was a full-on experience. And what I found was that the philosophy that I'd been using wasn't adequate to the experience I'd had with them. And also that the philosophies I was attracted to, the evolutionary philosophies, people like Ken Wilber and other people like that, didn't do it for me either. It didn't seem to address these things in a way that made sense to me. So I started opening up around that. And with this idea of what if everything's evolved, it opened up the possibility, okay, so what if the psyche is evolved? It looks like it. I mean, it definitely looks to me like the imaginal level. It's made of images of the sensory world. So it's come afterwards, hasn't it? It's not before, it's after. So how could we understand the survival of death? Because my experience with my parents, and I used to work with people who are dying when I was younger, and I've studied near-death experiences since, well, since very early days. I was one of the first members of the International Association of Near-Death Studies when I was very young. So, I followed this stuff, and it looks to me like it looks like we survived death. And what it enabled me to do, this worldview, was to go, oh, so what am I saying here? I'm saying you're already having an experience of the imaginal, so that when the body can't function, I'm not having an experience of the biological, but the experience of the imaginal continues. It's like, oh yeah, that's it. That's it. That just continues. And can we see, is there a way of seeing this where we can understand the faculty of the psyche, which itself has evolved to survive the death of the body, has also evolved. And this whole domain of the imaginal, the imaginos, I sometimes call it, to contrast with the cosmos, which is the domain that spirituality has always been about, has itself evolved. And that we can start to find a way then of taking these, I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of these descriptions of what happens after death. And so it feels like, let's take them seriously.
So you made a pretty wild claim that, what you see in the Egyptians, the Tibetans, the Vikings, the Greeks, and then us have represented evolution. A lot of people would just say, nah, that's culturally constrained and determined by where you live and when you were born. It's not moving in a direction. Can you address that
Yes.
and explain the argument?
Yes. So with this and with all spiritual experiences, because I'm saying, look, it's not that there's the truth and people have found it and lost it and seen it in different ways. I'm saying the thing they're experiencing is evolving. Because we're evolving. The whole thing is evolving. And that if the soul has evolved to survive the death of the body, we should expect the experience it has to have evolved. And I'd written a book on people's visions of heaven years ago, way before I thought any of this. And I started thinking about that again. I thought, hey, it's almost like you're watching it evolve. So the most obvious example to start with is, people often say, oh, it's just wishful thinking. But you go back to the first descriptions of surviving of death, and it doesn't sound very nice. The Hades is a land of shades. The same in the Jewish tradition and others. And so I started wondering, well, maybe that's just a description of what people are reporting, which is at that level, what survives death is kind of not, like one of those dreams you have, which are a bit vague and like that. And that will evolve so that then that becomes a projection of wishful thinking, for example, like the happy hunting grounds. It's like, and now it's more vivid, like a vivid dream. And then that's going to become culturally enlarged because all of this is happening in the imaginal. So it will become, if you are a Buddhist, you'll experience a land full of Buddhas, or if you're a Christian with saints. And it's not because that's just unreal, it's real. But it's real on the level of the imaginal. And you are experiencing this, and that souls are forming collectives and creating what I think of as soulscapes, they're like collective dreams, but establishing a geography, as it were, of the imaginal. And I think that's what the Tibetans started to notice, and then go, look, there's these bardos which you can move between, and they're imaginal. I mean, the Tibetans have really got this sense of the imaginal. And they're getting that, and then onwards, and then till today, it's multicultural. Anything can happen, from flying horses to beautiful gardens. But what's in them is also something which is suggesting this isn't just a personal fantasy, like meeting people that you've known before, who will tell you things that you didn't know. So when people are resuscitated, they go, "Did you have a kid?" And you never told me. It's like, yeah, I did. Oh, all of that stuff happens far more than people realize.
Yeah, because one of the things that made me think you might be right was the idea that contemporary life reviews, which are, really consistently reported, including by the Marvel star Jeremy Renner recently when he got run over by a 7-ton snowplow, they talk about they talk about you see your life from your perspective, but you also see how it impacted everyone you're connected to, which, based on your thesis, is a individual post-death experience because you're like, oh, I'm individuated. This is what I did, but I'm also differentiated and integrated because I'm seeing how it happens to everyone else. And that for me, I was like, oh, if the death experience is evolving, that's what it should look like.
Beautiful. Yes, Tom, absolutely. And then the other thing which I think very much resonates with this philosophy is what I said earlier about the past. So everything is made of the past. That's what it is. It's a process. So I'm meeting Tom. Well, who's Tom? Well, Tom is everything that Tom has ever experienced. So what is that? Well, it's Tom in relationship with everyone and the world. That's what Tom is. And you're meeting Tim, which is the whole of Tim's history. And then back, of course, as well into the whole deeper currents of evolution. So what happens in the life review? Well, you get to see who you are. That's who you are. There it is. That's you. You in relationship with everything. And you get to see that.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And you get to evaluate it.
Well, I mean, it's been a transformational moment in my life over the last month or so because like you spend a lot of time thinking you've gone nuts after these mystical experiences, and mine was even 8 years ago. But just recently, I don't know if you saw Dan Brown of the Da Vinci Code fame. He's just released a book called Secret of Secrets, and he spent 8 years with the literature. Ian Stevenson, Bruce Grayson, all of the hundreds of thousands of near-death experiences. And even though it's like a fiction book, the science and the anecdotes he's got in there are really good. Like I'm superficially conversant with the literature, and he went in there and he's like, I've now written this book that's #1 New York Times bestseller, and his one line takeaway was, I no longer fear death.
Wow. Wow. Beautiful.
It seems like it's in the zeitgeist for really the first time, certainly in my modern lifetime.
And funny for me, this is a bit of an aside, Tom, but
Yeah.
it's funny for me because my one bona fide international bestseller, which really was #6 on Amazon in the
Oh,
old days when there was only one child,
wow.
and was called The Jesus Mysteries, and it was followed up by a book called Jesus and the Lost Goddess. And Dan Brown mentioned Jesus and the Lost Goddess as one of the books that he'd used for research for the Da Vinci Code. So I spent that year or more doing endless, endless interviews about the Da Vinci Code, which climaxed with the one that I went, I can't do this anymore. It was when I was introduced on American radios. And now we've got Tim Freak, the guy who wrote the real Da Vinci Code. It was like, and the irony was I was saying something completely different to Dan Brown. So it was kind of funny. So the idea that he's now come out with this is like, right, okay. This pattern's repeating. That's nice.
Well,
But it's great. It's great. It's great. It's great. It is coming into the mainstream. We're ready. Look, people are hungry for meaning.
yeah.
It's like it's not good. There's this kind of creeping sense of, look, if you're a really hard-nosed thinker, if you're not going to go into the old mythic ideas and religion, then you've got to. We're a clever monkeys clinging to a bit of rock in the middle of nowhere here long enough to go, what the hell's this? And then gone. Nothing. No debriefing, no explanation. It's such a bleak vision. And I think it's completely wrong. And people are hungry for something more.
Well, to move on to a lighter topic, such as the definition of God, you you say that it's not a prime mover, it's not something standing out the system, kind of meting out instructions. It's the process itself. And you made again a similar analogy with shamanism starting with kind of animal totems and moving to where we are now. Can you just like talk about how that happened and why you think it happened?
Yeah. So the basic idea, well, it comes from the very first thing I said, Tom, which is what if everything that has any qualities whatsoever is part of this one process of forming?
Yeah.
So then you had this spiritual experience. I had one at 13. I've been having them on and off all the time. But and it was of this, vast loving intelligence. One way of describing it. So if everything is arising in the process of forming, so's that. And it's not outside, because I'm suggesting there's nothing outside. Anything you put outside, you don't explain. You just go, it's there. It's just there.
Mm.
So if you put consciousness outside, you haven't solved the problem of consciousness. You've just got rid of it. You go, it's just there. It's like you haven't solved anything. It's just sleight of hand. And the same with the universe. The universe is a mystery, but we can explain it with an even bigger mystery, which is there's a big mind which created the whole thing. It's like, well, we haven't done anything, have you? So here's what I'm suggesting. I think that what we experience as that vast loving intelligence is the most emergent level of this whole process of evolution. And my guess is that what's happening is that it is forming from individual psyches into a super psyche or a super soul, a big system. Like there is a big mind, like the ancients said. It's just that the big mind is made of lots of little minds. Like, you get all these computers, you plug them together, you get a supercomputer. Same principle. Or the one that I like is my body. Mm. It's like my body is made of all these individual cells, but they've all come together to create a super system, which is a multicellular organism. Well, maybe that same pattern is repeating itself. And what's happening is that as psyche, souls, come into communion with the oneness of all things, that brings them into a state of unity whereby they now become part of something bigger. And that's what's happening when you have that mystical experience and you go, my God, that's because what's just happened to you. Now, you may fall away from it again, come back to it again, but it's happened. And to go back to your previous thing about death, one of the things that people experience a lot is this love light. And I think that's the system. That's the super system. And people get drawn to it and they feel its presence. But that itself looks like it evolved. It's absolutely central to people today. It's there in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, 8th century, but it's not there in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is much, much earlier. And you don't get in the ancient world this idea that there's a loving God. It's just not there. The gods are mean and they're quite different. There's not different thing. And then suddenly you get this, oh, there's a loving God. And I think that's because it's actually emerged. It's evolved. It's there now. And we can connect with it and we contribute to it.
Yeah, because you had this idea of like the shamans kind of had animal gods, and then you had the ancient Egyptians that have like animal human hybrids, and then you have the ancient Greeks and Romans that have humans, but they're kind of like disparate angry emotions. And then you have the Old Testament, which is like an angry dad god, and then you have this full phase shift at Jesus and Christianity where it's a loving God, and things kind of transform from there. Is that right?
Beautifully put. Yeah, very, very succinctly put. Exactly right. That's what I think is happening. So like with the other things that we've talked about, you can start looking at the history of spirituality, not as, and here's the history of the weird things that people have thought, but actually, and there are weird things, of course, but also tracing an evolution of something real. They're tracing the evolution of the imaginal. That's it actually evolving. Yeah. And the thing I love, I've just got to drop this in because it's one of my favorite thoughts in all of this, taken from the analogy of the body, and that the super soul can be a super system in the same way that the body is a super system, but on the next level up. And this refers to something you mentioned earlier. What makes my body a multicellular system and not just a big blob of cells like a slime mold is that all the cells are different. They're doing different things. Yeah. That's why it can function. Yeah. And my sense is that is what's happening with the super system, with the super soul, with God. Yeah. It's because we're individual. So it's not like find God and dissolve like a drop of water into the great ocean, because let's face it, your life was meaningless. And all those struggles, nothing. Just dissolve them. Forget it. You don't exist anymore. The opposite of that. Going, no. Your individuality as Tom is what you get to contribute to this. That's why it can function, because you're Tom and not Tim. And that's what we bring to this greater thing. And that's why your life is, that's why it matters.
Your life really matters. Well, this is an instantly discrediting observation in the eyes of many, but I for reasons I cannot explain, I've been captivated by this channeled alien transmission from the from like 1980 called The Law of One, and it's brilliant. It's like ChatGPT with an advanced alien entity, and um,
Excellent.
and they describe this progression of humanity up through these octaves of differentiation and integration in a very, very, very similar way to you. And
Oh,
essentially, they say that each stage of evolution gets to something called a social memory complex, which is where the whole group has access to all of each other's differentiated memories, but still acts as an integrated whole. And there's an absolutely bonkers, almost certainly completely untrue story from this spiritual influencer type called Aubrey Marcus that he told on a podcast I was listening to, where he says he's in a darkness retreat. And on the sixth day, all these little spaceships appear around him in the room. And after a couple of days, he's like, "All right, who are you?" And they say, "Oh, we're the star nation of the Pleiadians," but a million entities speaking with one voice. And then he's like, and then they communicate and they give him a spiritual name. And he's like, "I don't like the spiritual name." And they find it so funny that they all split into a million different laughing voices where they all have their individual senses of humor, and then they come back and coalesce back into the whole again. And the entity that says it's speaking to the people channeling them in the 80s calls itself a social memory complex, where they're basically like this increasingly coalesced group. So I guess like the bonkersness of that aside, does your cosmology, like it could be accused by slightly crazy people like me of being somewhat anthropocentric, right? Like, does it make space for other entities that are further along than us or less far along than us on this process of becoming?
yes, it's not anthropomorphic in the slightest.
Ah,
Because all it's saying is, partly it's going, look, we value human type stuff. Well, no surprise there, is it? So we think consciousness and love and all these. This is really good because that's our emergent edge. We've specialized in psyche. That's what we're good at. Other species specialized in all sorts of different things. We have this unique nature which makes us us. We value it. I think we are coming into a greater communion, and that's happening here now. That is the whole universe arising as this, but it's here. Maybe it's happened elsewhere. I mean, I have no experience around things like you're describing from the guy. It might just be nuttiness, but it might not. It might be two other things as well as just nuttiness. In fact, I don't think it is nuttiness at all. I think, the two options I would come at that with is either that is a symbolic representation of something deep, which is arising because the psyche, the imaginal, has become so vivid because he's cut down everything else. You go into a darkness retreat. It's like when you close your eyes. You cut off all that, then this becomes super vivid, just like you dream at night. So no surprise that then leads to profoundly symbolic, dream-like experiences, which is saying something. So it may literally be that he is psi sensing through these images the reality that I'm trying to describe with philosophy. Nothing to do with the Pleiades, but to do with this. Or maybe it is to do with the Pleiades. I don't know. It's a very big universe. Maybe other groups of beings have already gone through this process. It's a huge universe,
yeah.
and if they were going to communicate with us, well, the place they're most likely to do it is in the imaginal because that's not in space. It'd be very hard to communicate in space, but to communicate in the imaginal, that might be perfectly possible. So maybe that's what's happening with that. Maybe that's what's happening with DMT visions, with Terence McKenna and all of those folks. And who knows? I mean, that's where I start and end with. Who knows? What I'm looking for is an open-ended philosophy, which can be inquiring and go, yeah, that's why not? That's possible. I wonder what that is,
Mm.
and we'll see.
To step back from the crazy fringe that I occupy for a second, I spent there's something that comes out of your work that's actually incredibly consistent with wisdom research and cognitive science, and something a deeply wise dude called John Vervaeke talks about, which is relevance realization. That essentially, the more wise and evolved you get, the better you get at determining relevance, which in your framing means that you're paying attention to the right thing. And if you're paying to the right thing, it's like the strong individual learning to sense the universe in a really cool way. And I spent a year researching essentially Ian McGilchrist's hemisphere theory and how to implement it last year. And the one word that dropped out of this entire series that I wasn't expecting to happen was essentially subtle. That we're getting, our sensing is getting increasingly subtle. And it seems to me that that meshes with your idea that our spiritual, the edge of what we can experience right now is what we would call spiritual experience. And it isn't necessarily a different category. Does that mesh somehow?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've mentioned two people I have love and have a deep respect for. I had a series called What Is Life, and I had conversations with both Ian and John in that series. And lovely, just very smart, but also very deep, loving people, beautiful. So these are the individuals, they're the ones. And so what I'm suggesting that may be coherent with it, I suspect all these things will fit in some way eventually, is that the psyche is a type of sense. So what I said earlier that that we're sensing the world, we're reading light and pressure and sound, vibrations in the air. And then we have the ability to focus in on what really matters. And that arose way before human beings, but we inherited it and we've got that ability. Also, way before human beings, I suggest, another sense started to evolve, just like all the other senses. And that sense was the system, which is the whole system, as you described it, the hard disk of the universe. It's the whole system is now also able to read its own passivity, its own processing. And that processing, which has been going on unconsciously the whole time, it can now focus on with that ability to make things conscious, focus in high definition. And so every system has been repeating the past, but now it can experience memory. And how is it going to experience that? It's actually sensing the past. And what it's producing is images, audio or visual images of the sensory world. But now that's what's going to populate this imaginal world. That's where it's going to come from. So that leads to memory, conscious memory now, and then conscious reflection and imagination and projection of the future and all the rest of it. But that sense, that psi sensing, is going to create all imaginal experience, because there's a mystery that took me a long time to even ask question, which was, how do I have spiritual experiences? I'm experiencing the oneness of all things. How? I can't see it. I can't touch it. How? Or I'm experiencing God. How? Or I'm feeling connected to Tom's soul. How? And what I think the answer to all of those hows is this ability to read information, which is what we're doing with the eyes and the ears and all that, but to read it in a far more emergent way. And I think it's a simple thing which can explain all of those phenomena, from memory right to experiencing God. And it's what's going, and it's that faculty to sense with the psyche, which gives rise to psychic experiences, but also everyday experiences, all of it, and spiritual experiences. And that is evolving. And all the esoteric traditions, the practices, have been about getting better at that. They've all been ways to help you do that. So that unlike my eyes, which in my lifetime, my eyes are not going to evolve to get better. In fact, they're evolving to get worse. But my psi sensing is much better. It's evolving, because it's the most emergent sense. It's able to, the more I practice, the better it gets. And I can learn to put it in places I've never put it before. And I would say, actually, what I do as a philosopher is psi sense. I psi sense the universe. And then I go, whoa, okay, how can I describe what I'm experiencing when I psi sense the nature of the universe or the nature of the imaginos? And that this is the subtle sense. And that right on the leading edge is where it's very subtle, because it's new. It's not established yet. And then there's some people that are really good at it. I mean, I love the fact, it blows me away, that there's people, I think there's 60 people at the moment, who can remember everything that ever happened to them. Everything. Yeah. What they had for breakfast 25 years ago on a Thursday. They can tell you every detail. Hypothymesia, where everything's remembered. And to me, I think they're just very good at psi sensing the past in a way that I'm not. But I'm quite good at psi sensing God in a way that lots of people aren't. Other people can sense the dead in a way that I can't. Other people can project their attention out and do far seeing, or as if they're seeing when they're not seeing. That's amazing. I can't do that. And that's what we're developing, these faculties within that imaginal domain.
Yeah, I haven't been able to prove it other than just a gut feeling, but it seems to me that the prevalence of those kind of psi senses, whether they're psi abilities of any variety or just the prevalence of mystical experience, seems to be increasing. And maybe it's just the
Yeah.
awareness of those things is increasing, but you have all these different, breach events for these things coming into public awareness. And it seems to me, listening to you, it's like, well, that kind of strikes me as the point of us being here, is to basically improve our size sensing. But like when people listen to this, your worldview is very, very different. And I find both electrifying and inspiring because it situates the participation of the individual right squarely in the middle. So how do you do this? How do you act in the world in a way that brings unividualism true?
Good question. Well, there's lots of answers to that. We touched on it before about, training yourself to sight sense, all the exercises you can do, meditation, all of that. I think the big one for me really is to come into communion with that presence which is greater than me as much as I can.
Mm,
And there's a kind of a flow to life. It's the Tao, it's the Tao, it's the becoming. And it's becoming, it's becoming. And to become that, when you're becoming one, you're not becoming one in some static way. You're becoming one with the process of becoming. And you're going, oh, yeah, I'm a stream in this one process of becoming. And then to tune into the most emergent level of that. And then what happens for me is that I'm at my best then. Then there's this real benevolence. Although I have to say, not although, as well, I have to say, one of the big shifts for me, Tom, that's happened in this last period is a real shakedown of my naivety.
mm,
Because I think one of the things that can happen when you experience the big love is you just think, oh, we just love and everything's going to be great. And then actually that's very naive and the reason it's naive is because you're living in an evolutionary world where you've got to live with physics, you've got to live with biology, the fact that your body's going to go wrong. And then you've got to live with other human beings who are living in the Middle Ages still,
mm.
or dangerous, or so it's important. The evolutionary picture, having evolutionary wisdom, is really important to being able to come into that universal benevolence that arises in it, when you start communing in the individual communion, and then the wisdom to actually bring it into life. That's hard, but
Mm.
but a marvelous challenge. And it dispenses with the naivety and it goes, right, okay, how do you bring this in? And then I think that's exactly the challenge. The challenge is, how do we come into that individual? Okay, yeah, it's a universal benevolence, but that guy's got to be stopped. Or, because that's the reality, that we're living in an evolutionary world. And that takes a high level of wisdom
Yeah.
to take this forward. So that I see two things. One is, you said earlier, it's increasing. And I absolutely think it is. If I just look at my own little experience, I've been teaching or whatever the hell it is I do for a few decades. And people just get it now so much quicker.
Yeah.
And I mean, get the experience here.
Mm,
It's like everyone went through to the big love. Everyone. And that's common now. Wasn't common.
mm.
But I want to add, I think the thing with that leading edge of spiritual evolution, still very naive. And that's a criticism of me because I was like that.
Mm.
Very naive. Hasn't got the evolutionary thing yet. Hasn't got this is what we're in. We're in an evolutionary process and love isn't enough. I need love wisdom. I need the wisdom to be able to really understand how this is working and how I can come into it. And where? Well, I feel like it's in wherever you are. It's like,
Mm.
it doesn't have to be everywhere. You can't take on the world, but you just take on all your relationships and bring that benevolence, that love into wherever you are.
Yeah. Although it can sound a bit like a fortune cookie, after my explorations, I tend to think finding the place where doing what you love in service of love, differentiation and integration seems to be where you pick up the Tao and things just start to work out. And it's a very simple worldview, but it's incredibly bloody difficult. In fact, it's the purpose of the leading edge as an organization, which is like,
Hmm.
cool, you've also got a mortgage. And
Yeah.
there's an aspect of this that I think leads back to you, which is um, it's struck me from listening to you now and to listening to so much of your work that this latest project is something you couldn't not do. That basically you're compelled to do it. The lovely expression I love from John Vervaeke is a voluntary necessity. That
Mm.
it's something that calls to you, and I wanted to finish by saying, like I believe these conversations are reciprocal, and I believe that there are very, 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 very few people like you, which is unfortunate because I've spent 10 years looking for you, where people who are there's less than the fingers of one hand, who have a post-scientific, plausible, optimistic, participatory worldview. How can we support you?
Oh, well, first of all, just by articulating it that clearly, because that just brings such joy to my heart. That's exactly right, and and I think that's a huge thing, Tom. And you've been very complimentary to me, which is that is support. That's immense support, and it is hard work every day, and it will be for the foreseeable future. But the first thing I want to say, and this is me returning the compliment, really, to hear somebody who's gone out, gone, I'm interested in this, actually listened to what I've been trying to say, and then have been able to come back and articulate it so clearly, sometimes clearer than I was, is just, oh, that's it. That's the biggest support. That is fantastic. And then for me, it's like, okay, well, I this is what I have to do,
Mm,
and so the next job is just to say it, just finish this project, which will be another, I've done it'll be about 100 chapters. I think I've done about 30. And then it's really about I want to just do this. I want to go out and talk to people. I want to find the right people. Because right now it's not about finding a lot of people, it's finding the right people. The small handful of people that go, yep. And I want to pass it on to and develop it with the right people so that it's able to take form. And then you know how it works. It's like once that's happened, it becomes easier for everybody else. And that becomes easier. And then it becomes easier. And that's how things change from that's weird to, well, that's common sense.
yeah,
It's just that process.
yeah.
And so it's reaching out. And of course, that's about talking to people. It's about finance. It's about all the practical things that are involved in doing that and bringing something good into the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm utterly obsessed, and I put my money where my mouth is in terms of these Dunbar number 150 communities that I think are going to be very, very tight within themselves, but going to be sharing information and resources between each other. And I hope those resources include, ideas, practices, money. You have a community of your own, the rather cleverly acronymed ICU. Is that correct?
That's correct. The International Community of Unividuals, the ICU. And that's a small community of people who are exploring this with me. Some have been exploring with me for years, some are more recent. And I meet up every Sunday and we talk ideas. We do practices also online, which can be amazing.
Mm,
And it's lovely. And I loved the stuff that you've communicated to me about community.
mm.
And I really appreciated the the fact that the people who are in the ICU that attend the events, they know each other.
Yeah.
They're friends now. They're all over the world. We've got, Bella gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning in Australia and someone else is in America. And it's like all of these people, they know each other. And that's lovely because that's the bonds then that are forming the soul bonds. And that can make a huge difference. And then, the most satisfying things I've done recently is reaching out to some of these other small communities. And I've done talks to 1,000 people, but actually more can happen with a small group of people who are absolutely ready and going, ooh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's what's emerging right now, and it's emerging at very rapid speed.
I love that.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's really significant, really significant. Like that image behind you with all those things, those dots connecting.
Yeah, it's happening right now. Uh,
Yeah.
Tim Freak, this exceeded my my lofty expectations. You're doing a magical thing, and I hope listeners support you both with their money and their resources and their attention and their time. And where can people reach you? Last thing.
Okay, so I've got a weird name, and as long as you spell it right, you will find me. It's pronounced Freak, but it's spelled Freke. Timfreak.com is my website. You can contact me there. You can find out about the ICU there. We will be running events again because I'm doing the pod book. We haven't got any planned right now, although we will at some point next year. So if you want to hear about the things I do like this, because I do conversations, sign up on the newsletter and you'll get a little newsletter that comes through. You can watch for free my life's work on YouTube, Why Your Life Really Matters, the pod book. And also, like you said, is audio on Audible and Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. You can, if you join the ICU, you get to see all of the ones that I've produced so far. Because I put them out each week, but there's a backlog that's already done, and you can get ahead of the game if you're a member of the ICU. The ICU costs you exactly what you want to contribute. There's no, yeah, it's just completely open.
And
Partly because it's about, for me, it's about actually contributing. It's like contribute. That's what you want to be, part of something.
I have contributed, and I hope people listening, if they like the ideas, do the same.
Yeah, much appreciated, Tom.
Tim Freak, thank you for being on the leading edge and at the leading edge. Thank you.